Hello and welcome to the Royal Beat Book Club. I'm Laurence Llewelyn-Bowen, and in this series we do the literary heavy lifting for you, reviewing the very best royal books in print so that you know which ones truly deserve a spot on your, I'm sure, incredibly beautifully arranged bookshelf. Over a remarkable 96 years of life and more than 70 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth II became the most famous woman in the world. Her first biography was published when she was just 4 years old, and throughout her life, thousands of memoirs, historical accounts and books were written about her every move. But today, we'll be exploring her life from a very different perspective as we delve into Craig Brown's fascinating book, A Voyage Around the Queen. Here to discuss this wonderfully engaging and hilarious book, I'm delighted to be joined by the wonderfully hilarious and very engaging Craig Brown, the author, the Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large Charlotte Griffiths, and former press secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, Ailsa Anderson. Welcome to you all. It's lovely to have you here. Now, Craig, as we're talking about your book, let's get started with you. Over the years, you have been hailed as someone who's kind of deconstructed the biography. What motivates you to look at this from such a different angle?
Well, there are far too many books about the Queen, really. She's the most written about person in the world, probably in history.
So was that the thing that drove you?
And so I sort of took all the other books as all the other authors as my researchers, as it were. And then I thought, what can I do which is new and fresh? And so I then went off-piste, and so I looked at, the Queen look-alike, Jeanette Charles, and there's a chapter on her, or the Beatles, or Marilyn Monroe, and so if you go beyond the royal boundaries, you get a lot about what other people thought of her and how she dealt with them and that sort of thing.
So it's a sense of sort of being 360 degrees around the subject rather than kind of sort of focused in. Yeah. It's about the effect that the Queen had on the world.
Yes, this extraordinary effect she had on people, not just people when they met her, but that she sort of entered into everyone's psyche.
Yeah.
So there's a long chapter, or a couple of chapters on people dreaming about the Queen.
Let's talk about that later, because it's absolutely fun. Ailsa, did you used to dream about the Queen when you worked for her?
I can confess that I never, ever dreamt about the Queen when I worked for her. Sorry.
Yeah. How do you start with something like a royal biography? Is there a protocol? Is there a process? Do you have to sort of have an appointment and go on bended knee, or do you just get on with it?
It depends, really. Some people who are writing about the monarch will come to us and they'll want to fact-check particular elements of it. Sometimes we won't have a clue what's going on, and a book will be published. So it very much depends on whether they want to be an authorised biographer or whether they're just writing something, off their own back.
Because, one of the big things that you kicked up a bit of a storm, didn't you, Craig, about Donald Trump?
Oh, yes.
Because the published comment in your book, which was that the Queen found Donald slightly...
Yeah, she said to someone I know that she thought he was a very rude man. And I just dropped that into a chapter which is about her having to deal with actually much more difficult people than Donald Trump, like people like Idi Amin or Ceausescu. But then the Mail, which was serialising the book, the beady-eyed editor noticed that on about day 4 of the serialisation. And so he decided to make that a sort of front-page story. And then the next day, Donald Trump was interviewed on camera about it, and he called me a sleazebag.
I hope you've got that tattooed somewhere.
Yeah,
that's the ultimate.
I wanted him to keep calling me a sleazebag every day.
But Charlotte, is it? I suppose surely it's completely impossible for us to even think that the Queen was nice about absolutely everybody.
Well, she gave this impression that she would just smile serenely, but in your book, there's a couple of examples. She called a portrait artist a horrible man,
yes,
didn't she?
Laszlo, who was fairly inoffensive man who did lots of portraits and did her very first portrait, and she said he was. Since writing the book, 2 people have told me very spiky things, because some people said, well, the thing about Trump can't be true, but actually, well, I can't say who they were, but sort of 2 household names sitting next to lunch had told me two very controversial things, which if they'd come out at the time would certainly headline news, probably gone on for weeks.
I'm sure she had to be on her guard all the time, but she lived for 96 years. She must have slipped up once or twice.
And also, I think it wasn't slipping up. I think she just trusted. I mean, both these people I was talking about, very trusty people, and so they would never have told me while she was still alive, I don't think.
But I mean, alongside the sort of the wit, because I mean, for me, the book is a bit like being at a dinner party where everybody's talking about the Queen from different angles. It's a lovely conversational read. You can sort of dip in and dip out of it. But I mean, it's also about there's a depth as well. There's a sadness. There's it wasn't all sort of plain sailing for her, was it? At all?
No, and I think I want to say in the long chapters dealing with her death, I mean, there was something very profound about her death and its effect on everyone. Even anti-monarchists, found themselves weeping, or the procession of people going past her coffin. Huge variety of people, and you could see it was really meaning something because she was as much a symbol as anything else, and in death she was a symbol of other people's deaths as well as her own. So she was standing in for people's grandmothers or their mothers or their own death.
Yeah, I mean, this is it, Charlotte, isn't it? She sort of very much became icon is such an overused word, but actually it's almost like an entire nation, a whole society is putting all their best bits together. Including a very kind of casual relationship with Paddington Bear, into one person. And, why do we feel we need to do that?
I don't know. I think because she's a mirror, isn't she, for what we want our grandmothers to be like. There's a great bit in your book where it says that people imagine her watching EastEnders in the Bill. I doubt she ever did that. But of course, if people's grandmothers watch EastEnders in the Bill, that's what they project onto her. And she also oversaw an entire era of so much change. And for me, that's what she was a symbol of. And you just almost couldn't believe it. I'm 40, and I read books about her and think, gosh, she was there for when TV was black and white, but also when Paddington Bear, this CGI animal, was in front of her having a conversation with her. What a disparate kind of time that she presided over.
I also think she was a constant in this ever-changing world where there's economic crisis, there's wars. She was a constant in our life. She was something that we could rely on. She wasn't a politician. She wasn't spinning. She was there primarily for us, not for herself.
And you'd have had to have been sort of 101 to remember a time when she wasn't around. Because she was famous from her birth. That was headline news. It was famous all her life for 96 years.
Well, I mean, let's go right the way back to because one of the slightly more bumpy moments was when her former nanny, Marion Crawford, brought out a book. So the Crawford-gate. Ailsa, what was that all about?
Well, I wasn't there.
I'm not saying you were, but I know
the
you
wrinkles
know
are coming
people
in.
who were.
I think the obvious issue about that was the lack of trust. Someone who you've taken into your family, someone who is a nanny to your children, and then suddenly writes a book about it. And it's just this person who's meant to display loyalty to you and your family are suddenly sort of bearing all in a book. And it's a shock. It's probably the first time this has ever happened to her.
It's interesting, though, because, I mean, there were a couple of other books coming out at the same time. I think you mentioned one. I think one of the courtiers brought out a book.
Yes, no,
and the Queen Mother was less...
The Queen Mother she'd been a governess or something earlier, this woman. I can't remember what her name was. But... she brought out a series of anodyne books, all of which the Queen Mother approved
Very supportive of.
And so I think they did treat Marion Crawford very unfairly, actually.
I love your description of the Queen Mother's response to Marion Crawford. The letter that starts off in this very kind of, quite sugary, very kind of placatory way. But then gradually you get this feeling of sort of, steel pincers being operated inside.
And then they wouldn't even send her a Christmas card. I mean, she worked for them for 17 years or something. And I mean, when Princess Margaret was, I think, 17, Marion Crawford had long wanted to get married and start a family, and that she kept putting it off. And age 17, when Princess Margaret was 17, she said, "Oh, but I must go now." And she, how could you possibly leave us at this time?
Yeah, because I mean, I love this thing as well, that because she was quite an unusual person. I mean, Marion Crawford was a very unusual person. She was an educator with a capital E, wasn't she? And she wanted to be a child psychologist. And she did some quite strange things, like she took them on the tube and she took them out for tea.
Yes. I mean, she got permission to do that, but and I think she was obviously very. I mean, she's probably closer to them than their parents, who are kind of busy. people. And so she would have known. And actually, the book, I think, is quite a good book. It seems anodyne to us, but actually, you get very sharp insights into the difference between the two princesses.
But also, I mean, don't forget, Charlotte, that, I mean, they were, you know, for royal parents, actually, they were very engaged, weren't they? I mean, it was all about trying to build a new sort of royal family environment. They were a type we4, wasn't it?
They were quite engaged, and that's what, in fact, that letter from the Queen Mother shows, that she was actually really invested in the Queen and really upset about this book coming out. But I have to say, I think it was actually really cruel of the Queen Mother because, as you say, she could have given permission for the book. Permission was sought. She did have oversight, and she stripped Crawford away from her daughters. It must have utterly broken their heart, shattered their world. And you see people like Jacob Rees-Mogg now, OK, so he still has his nanny living with him. These people, these upper-class people, get very attached to their
My nanny couldn't wait to get away. Like clawing at the door.
I think it's more heartbreaking for the Queen, not that she wrote the book, but that she had to be banished afterwards.
What do you think? I mean, of course, we can't really, you know, it's a very dangerous game, but do you think something like that, at a very, very early age, would breed in the Queen a sense of, you know, it's like reserve when it came to what are people going to say, what are people going to publish?
I'm sure it did. And I also think that it taught them how to phase people out. And if you cross that line, she learnt very early on, bring up the drawbridge, completely blank them, phase them out, pretend they never existed, which is something you see throughout the Queen's life she did over and over again. You know, most recently with Meghan and Harry. You know, she's a non-person that you don't talk about in royal circles anymore. Meghan, this is. So I think it taught her that lesson.
She was pretty ruthless with Andrew, actually, when he might have been facing trial. But most families stick with someone until they're found guilty, but they stripped him of all his positions before that. So there is a sort of a slightly sort of mafia Don feeling about the senior royals, I think.
Well, sounds a bit Succession, doesn't it? Ailsa, let's talk corgis. Because now this, I know, because I'm sure you're dreading this question. And I'm now suddenly looking at your very, very elegant ankles, seeing whether there is any long-term scarring from Her Majesty's corgis.
I remember working in Buckingham Palace and dreading the time when the corgis, 7 or 8 of them, and the dorgies, would charge along the corridor. And I used to try and hide in an office so they wouldn't get me. I mean, I'm a Labrador lover. I love dogs. They are hideous.
There are going to be a lot of corgi owners.
Sorry, personal.
It's a personal preference, obviously. There's that lovely, very spiky moment in your book where Nancy Mitford actually points out that the Queen Mother was beginning to resemble a corgi.
I mean, I have a long litany of, you know, it's blood everywhere.
Isn't
the
it
history
just?
of the corgi is one of bloodshed, especially when you mix them with Princess Anne's bull terriers.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, and again, I love this sort of essay that you've got in there about corgis specifically being almost like, you know, misrule. That actually, in this incredibly controlled life, in this existence where everything is thought through, you can't think through a corgi.
And it would be very if you told me that the person who lived next door to you had was a woman living with 12 corgis at any one time, you'd think this is a very eccentric thing. And I think
you've obviously not been to my neck of the Cotswolds. I mean, that's actually, people are going, only 12.
But I think she obviously liked this this area of misrule and chaos, and she needed that to balance this very predictable life she otherwise had.
But I mean, you always think of her, you know, her predecessor Charles II, who always had this flotilla of King Charles Spaniels, who were generally speaking a little bit better behaved, but you know, nonetheless, perhaps it's something to do with having big corridors.
But she did
you need
use
to make a statement.
The moving carpet,
the
as
moving
Diana called
carpet,
them.
you know,
But she did use them as an icebreaker. So there were so many times at lunches or receptions she would bring them in, and that sort of chaotic nature of them actually broke the ice and made people feel more at ease. Although,
again, there's a wonderful bit in your book where someone's speaking to her about meeting the Emperor of Japan, and he never stopped talking about his fish. And then he says she never stopped talking about her dogs. But why do you think she loved them so much? Why the dogs? Why the corgis? Is it
well, first she really liked animals, so horses and dogs. So she was a natural. You know, people say that if she wasn't a queen, she'd have been a kind of upper middle class or upper class country woman. And most of her instincts instincts were like that. She wasn't...
She's the first corgi.
That's Susan.
That's
yeah.
Susan.
I think she got her when
Such
she was
a weird
8.
name for a corgi as well.
He took her on honeymoon with her.
Well, I know.
Because she prefers her to Philip, by all accounts.
And they're buried, if you go to Sandringham, there are these lines of gravestones, and Susan's the first, obviously.
It's a bit like Peggy Guggenheim and all her dogs, in Venice.
Yeah.
But I mean, is it in this very sort of romantic way, is it this ability to be able to, step outside this very controlled existence and be, a little bit naughty? Because, I mean, there was tremendous mischief behind those icy blue eyes, wasn't there, Charlotte?
My theory is that they're so disobedient. And imagine a lifetime of people obeying you and fawning over you and telling you what you want to hear. It actually must get quite exhausting. Where here's a corgi, couldn't care less who she is, will do a poo on her carpet in front of her shoes. She must quite, that mischievous side of her must quite enjoy that.
I mean, you use words like disorderly and disobedient. There's sort of words that you use about her husband as well. And he
found the corgis maddening.
He didn't like them,
possibly
did he?
because they're a bit too similar. Both disobeying her.
Well, I think there's another bit where there's a tremendous accident of interior design where the corgis are the same colour as the carpet.
Yeah,
so that really. So basically, you're being bitten by the carpet.
And when Prince Philip once sort of tripped over one, he said to the Queen, "Why do you have to have so many of them?" And she kind of wittily, I think, replied, "Oh, but Philip, they're so collectible." She was a kind of completist in this way. Yeah.
I loved it when she said, "Do you think your dogs would sit?" And she said, "Oh, yes, of course they will." And then she goes, "Well, one of them would." What about the other 11?
And they became such an incredible part. They were one of her real kind of icons, weren't they? One of her real motifs, one of her sort of signature stars. And actually, if ever anyone needed to impersonate the Queen or do a cartoon of the Queen,
you'd have to.
You just needed a corgi.
You
got the whole thing across.
But quite a lot of people don't get corgis or breed corgis for that reason, because they think it's so synonymous with the Queen. You'd look a bit mad as just a sort of 24-year-old hipster with a corgi.
Yeah, I think they need to come back.
With Renaissance, corgi Renaissance.
And maybe change their colour slightly,
Please no.
No, can you imagine? But yeah, so I mean, they had their fair share of time in the limelight. But Ailsa, the Queen's celebrity count must have been through the roof.
Oh
the amount of people that she met.
I know. I remember one quite surreal occasion. It was during the state visit of President Obama, Mrs. Obama, and standing at a pre-lunch reception and seeing the Queen walking towards our group with President Obama. And I thought, who is the Queen going to introduce him to? Because we're just staff. And she came over and said, "Mr. President, this is my press secretary." And the President started speaking to me. And I thought, oh, my golly, I can't believe the Queen has introduced President Obama to me. And it's those moments which it's surreal. You talked right at the beginning about dreaming about something. I mean, that is a dream come true, really.
And at the very same time as you were thinking that, or within minutes, Michelle Obama has in her autobiography how overawed she was to meet the Queen, because the Queen's much more famous. Or Michelle Obama had been famous for maybe 10 years, but the Queen...
Absolutely.
Yes, I love that you were starstruck by Obama, but not the Queen.
Yeah. But there is this thing, again, it comes across so well in the book, this idea of these sort of evaporating conversations that people have with the Queen, but particularly in a celebrity context, and particularly when it came to things like the investitures.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, when you bump into the Queen at a cocktail party or whatever, you are very much one amongst many. But suddenly you have your moment in the sun. You are kneeling in front of her or standing in front of her. You've got, however, how many seconds is it generally speaking?
30 seconds.
Yeah, but that is, real face-to-face, one-on-one time.
Yes.
Have you noticed any celebrities sort of struggling to cope in those instances?
Well, I was invested, and I can't remember what the Queen said to me, and I'd worked with her for 13 years.
Exactly, that's your boss.
Yes, and I remember actually chatting to Helen Mirren before a reception, and she'd just got an Oscar for playing the Queen in the movie. And she said, I'm really, really nervous about meeting the Queen. I said, golly, you're Helen Mirren. You've just played the Queen. She said, yes, but this is someone who's been part of my life, forever, and I'm meeting her, and she's iconic, and I can't believe I'm standing here and I'm going to meet her.
Did you have sort of like two queens? So the Queen that you would have a meeting with at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning to go through stuff, and yes, she was the boss, but then suddenly when she became the Queen, and, she was the official Queen, and she was like, sort of a full headlight Queen.
I think she was always the Queen, to be absolutely honest. Yes, I think, she wasn't. I wasn't her friend.
No.
I was a member of her staff. I was there to serve. So she was always the Queen.
Yeah. And how was she when you met her, Craig?
Well, she was very predictable and constant.
But how were you, Craig?
I was only very young. I was probably 19, I suppose. I'd had one or two drinks. I wasn't expecting to meet her. It was a friend's parents' wedding anniversary party. And then so I was crossing over the room, and the father said, "Oh, would you like to be presented?" So I sort of said, "Oh, yeah." And I just talked rubbish. I mean, he said, "Oh, Craig's studying drama," and I was telling her about Bertolt Brecht and rabbiting on about, alienation theories of drama, all these, and she was saying, "Oh yes, very interesting," very, which is a normal response. But I was taking her at her word, and then she would take a step back, and I would take a step forward.
That's a signal.
Yeah, I know.
She was retreating.
I didn't read the room very well, and also I remember over her shoulder I could see this little gang of my friends all sort of pointing and laughing. And you've seen her, I mean, it's like with Michelle Obama, you've seen her every day of your life on a stamp or on a newspaper, on a magazine, on the television, and suddenly you have her in front of you, and of course everyone went mad, and she may well have thought all of us were mad.
I love that theme in your book where you say that she thinks the whole nation is gibbering idiots who wet themselves and can't talk.
Well, or does she? Because Charlotte, I think this is another thing that you do cover very well. Surely she saw through that. Surely, after a lifetime of doing that, surely she knew she was never really meeting the real person. I wonder whether there was ever a point where she thought, "Oh, I wish they'd just quieten down. I wish, I'd love to actually have a proper conversation with them."
Yeah, and I think you also say in your book how everyone put on their best Sunday best voice for her. I wonder if she thought, wonder what people actually talk like. So I totally think she must have imagined that, but she probably never really got to see what people are really like in her whole lifetime.
In a funny way, she wasn't a very good, I'm not from my own experience, but she wasn't very good conversationalist. She was kind of naturally reticent and shy and didn't have a great, there are other members of the royal family are good at chatting, but she wasn't very curious.
Well, again, there's an anecdote where you say there's a room and there was the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret and the Queen Mother is, these wonderful circular hand movements and everyone's laughing gaily, and Princess Margaret's got a long cigarette on and playing the piano, and the Queen was just the Queen. They were actually their personalities. I mean, Ailsa, there are unfortunately some documented instances of people losing physical control with the Queen, aren't there?
Good Lord.
Yeah, apparently peeing was something that did happen occasionally.
I was suddenly told by Alexander Chancellor, who was then the editor of The Spectator. She had these little lunches of about 12 kind of bigwigs, and he was told that they were advised by a courtier, it'd be good to spend a penny beforehand because we have had accidents.
There we are.
And these were...
I've been to some of those lunches.
Also, I mean, how much briefing did people get before meeting the Queen?
It was very sort of standard briefing about what was going to happen, especially for investitures, because people want to be put at their ease beforehand and know exactly what to expect and have no surprises. So it was actually putting people at their ease rather than something for the Queen.
It's a really interesting way of putting it, because I mean, I think for a lot of people you think, it's all bowing and scraping and deference to her, but actually what people want to know is what they should be doing. And this is one of the really common themes in all these dreams that you document so hilariously. That most of the dreams that people have about the Queen are the fact that they're doing something not right. But the Queen is terribly understanding about it. Which of the Prime Ministers, wasn't she sitting next to one of the Prime Ministers who was saying that he was having anxiety dreams about her, and she said, were you naked?
That was Boris, Boris, who's probably the most sort of gabby of her Prime Ministers. Yes, he said, that he had a dream, and she was so used to people being naked in dreams that she asked him that question. I mean, quite funny. I mean, she could be quite funny, I think.
And also, I mean, the other thing I think that was absolutely brilliant was the fact that you found that, in fact, her sister, Princess Margaret, used to have anxiety dreams about her. Yes. Same as everybody in the rest of the country. Yeah,
a friend of mine was sitting next to Princess Margaret at dinner. I mean, he'd been next to her before. And he said, everyone else has dreams about the Queen. Do you? And she said she had this recurring nightmare, that she'd done something wrong and she didn't know what it was, but she knew it was wrong. And then she'd wake up, in real life, as it were, in a state of sort of terror, and she had to then ring her sister, who was already hard at work. And the moment she heard her voice, she was reassured, and so she could carry on with her day.
Phew, back to sleep.
Yeah.
Ailsa, let's talk, relevance, because I think this is something that, she absolutely seemed to get more and more relevant. This is what's extraordinary. You think about the last 10 years, and it's not just things like hanging out with James Bond and hanging out with Paddington. Actually, during COVID, and there seemed to be something. She just got better and better and better in our heads at being who she was.
I think she was very good at reading the mood.
Yeah.
She had some, I'm not talking about me, but she had some excellent advisors around her. And I think a lot of it was an instinct. And you look at lockdown when she talks about, we will meet again. We found it relatable, even though she was at Windsor Castle and we were probably locked up in our flats in London. We still felt that she was one of us and we could relate to her.
Charlotte, how do you think she would have adapted? Because actually, since her death, so much has happened in the royal family. We've had some extraordinary, unprecedented moments, particularly things like the Princess of Wales and the chemotherapy and the video that she brought out. Do you think that the Queen would have been behind that kind of very, very popular way of approaching it?
Do you know, I actually don't think she might have approved of that latest video, because I think she moved with the times. She did the Paddington thing, she did the James Bond skit, which is pretty modern. You're connecting directly with your audience. But whether she'd approve of a highly stylised video like the one Catherine brought out. However, I think she might have been quite understanding, because, of course, it was an extraordinary circumstance. The Princess of Wales is telling everyone that she's recovering from cancer, and we now know she's in remission. So I think she would have been understanding the idea of thinking outside the box. But I think, her great thing was don't share too much. Don't show too much of yourself playing card games at the dining room table. And, of course, she famously did do that in the 70s. And the video was a disaster. The documentary was a disaster, and she sort of had it banned. So I'm not sure she would have really encouraged too much more of that.
But do you not think it's... obviously it would not have worked for her, but because of who the Princess of Wales is, and she was so honest about it. That was the thing. There was no sort of, there was no kind of maquillage to it. It was a very kind of straight between the eyes. She sort of, it was real. It would work.
Well, the bench video, I think, the straight between the eyes one, I think she would have understood that. It's more, I was referring to the stylised video afterwards. I think probably she would have understood that, they're a younger generation and they have to somehow find a way around that incredible sort of Twitter storm that they were dealing with. I wonder if she even understood a Twitter storm before her death. They are a unique set of circumstances, but I just think she really believed in the value of being that mirror that the nation wants to project their thoughts onto. And if you know too much about Catherine, then you can't do that. And I think Catherine's just on the right side of that kind of thing, actually. We don't quite know her too well. And so she needs to sort of maintain that, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, you look at the Queen jumping out of a helicopter for Olympics 2012. So, she did think out of the box.
That was a spoof, wasn't it? You did see she really, really
and
was.
both with the Olympics with James Bond and with Paddington, of course, these are fictional characters. So it's, it's in many ways even cleverer. So it's sort of like,
double bluff.
It is absolutely a double bluff. It's, yes, I'm going to show you something you've never seen before, but it's incredibly stage managed.
Yeah.
But it's also, showing a sense of humour.
One is theatre, and the other one is showing your emotions. And she was very stiff upper lip about emotions and show. I remember even when on one of her jubilees, Charles called her mummy in the speech, and you could see her slightly flinching.
When you pick up a cat and it goes like that. Ailsa, did it take a lot to get her into that helicopter and get her to jump out of it for the Olympics?
Not at all.
She was into it right from the beginning.
It was. I think people around her were slightly more cautious, but she said yes.
I love that video she did with Prince Harry where he goes mic drop as well. That was a really nice little glimpse into her relationship with him back when it was much more amicable.
I think one of the things that, and I think this comes across so much from your book, is that, actually, as a human being, she was lovely. She was a really very, very thoughtful person who took her role very seriously. And actually, she became this thing that we all wanted a little bit of, the best of us. And she became sort of like the repository of the best of us that didn't get involved in Twitter storms and, but then did have a marmalade sandwich in her.
Yes, in her handbag.
Did she have a marmalade sandwich in her handbag, Ailsa?
I've never seen the inside of her handbag.
Really?
So I'm afraid I cannot confirm or deny.
Oh, rats!
Sorry.
I really want
The
to
only
know
reason
what
we
she
had
kept
you
in
on.
her.
I suppose no one even put it through an X-ray machine. Well, that was absolutely fascinating. Everything we wanted. Thank you very much indeed to my guests, Ailsa, Charlotte, and of course Craig, whose book A Voyage Around the Queen is out in the UK and US and really deserves a place on your bookshelf. Look how wonderful and pink and orange it is. Very, very directional in interior design terms.